Golarion has a rich history full of war and conflict. Some of these are more impactful than others, but the Shining Crusade has truly changed the life of the Inner Sea region. What led to this war? What were the impacts? And what are the ramifications today? Let's find out today on Golarion in depth. In the 9th century AR, the Wizard King Tar-Baphon terrorized central Avestan. He was an immensely powerful necromancer that followed the teachings of the Whispering Way, and he longed for immortality through undeath. He and his undead minions grew so powerful that it took the power of Eredin himself to defeat him. The god of humanity killed Tar-Baphon in the year 896 AR on the Isle of Terror in the lake in Carthan. For thousands of years, nothing was heard of Tar-Baphon. Many began to believe that the stories were just myth or legend, and the stories of the great Wizard King began to slip away from history. But through his necromantic power, Tar-Baphon was reborn as a lich in 3203 AR, and he called himself the Whispering Tyrant. He gathered his undead followers and traveled north into what is now known as the Hold of Belkzen. He unified the orcs there with the promise of riches and power over the central lands of Avestan. By the end of the year, they had conquered Ustalav. Tar-Baphon consolidated his rule over the next 600 years, and Ustalav became synonymous with terror. Meanwhile, to the south, Taldor had been using the armies of exploration to expand its empire. Throughout the first 4 millennia AR, these efforts had been relatively successful, and the influence of Taldor has left a lasting impression on all of Avestan. Even the language often referred to as common in Avestan is the language of the Taldorian Empire. Taldor saw the Whispering Tyrant as a significant threat to further exploration, and the forces of Taldor launched the Shining Crusade against the Lich in the year 3754 AR. Warriors from all over the Empire converged on the Ustalav town of Vilimus as a forward staging area. Here they were joined by the dwarves of Kraggadon and the Knights of Ozem. The alliance between Taldor and the dwarves of Kraggadon was secured through marriage, and an enchanted ring was forged by the dwarves. This ring was said to give General Shea Veritin great fortune. Leading the Knights of Ozem was General Iomade, a devout follower of Eredin, whose destiny has only just begun. Despite this great alliance, the forces of the Whispering Tyrant seemed endless. Any living soldier that died in combat could simply be raised again to join Tar-Baphon's undead minions. The battle waged for 26 years until the Shining Crusade finally secured a beachhead on the northern shores of Lake Carthan in the year 3801 AR. The town of Vontil was secured by a stroke of pure luck, or perhaps divine intervention. One of the Whispering Tyrant's most notorious and cruel generals was a vampire lord named Malleus. Malleus' arch-enemy was Lovik Saravij, another vampire lord in Ustalav, who is and has always been in opposition to the rule of the Whispering Tyrant. The long battle between these two vampire lords has yet to be resolved, but it distracted Malleus from his post on the fateful day that the Crusaders reclaimed Vontil. Now, in Ustalav, the Crusaders fight against hordes of undead, slowly reclaiming villages, towns, and cities that had been under the Lich's controls for centuries. In 3818 AR, the Knights of Ozem summoned Eredin's herald, the warrior goddess Orozni, but she was no match for the powerful Lich. Tar-Baphon killed Orozni in 3823 AR. This defeat destroyed the morale of the crusade, but General Iomade rallied the Knights of Ozem and initiated a counterstrike that completely destroyed their vanguard at the Battle of Vashil Pass. Unwilling to give up their patron to the enemies, the knights recovered Orozni's corpse at the Battle of Three Sorrows. It is here where Iomade battled Ermahil, Lord of the Morgues. This victory was one of the acts of Iomade, which would later pave her way to divinity. Orozni's body was laid to rest in the Crusaders' Keep, which would later form the foundation of the Settlement of Vigil. For over 7 decades, the Shining Crusade fought against Tar-Baphon and his undead minions. Then, in 3827 AR, Tar-Baphon singled out the Taldorian general Arnisat. The general was protected by a mighty artifact known as the Shield of Eredin, which had been an effective defense against the Whispering Tyrant's power. Tar-Baphon attempted to transport Arnisat's steel-beating heart into his hand through a wish spell. But this powerful shield blocked the spell and shattered into 12 pieces. One splinter buried itself into Tar-Baphon's hand, consuming him in holy fire and destroyed his mortal form. The spirit's lich returned to his soul cage, which was deep inside Gallowspire. Unable to fully destroy the lich, the Crusaders erected the Great Seal within Gallowspire and entombed Tar-Baphon for eternity. The Shining Crusade had finally come to an end. In the aftermath, the orcs fled back to Belkzen. Many of the Lich King's officers also fled rather than face final death on the battlefield. Even the vampire lord Malleus retreated to his home in Castle Cronquist. Crusaders attempted to infiltrate this castle unsuccessfully for a year. The garrison was kept outside Cronquist, but after more than a century of no activity, the rulers of Ustalav judged that Malleus had somehow escaped. Legends state that a clock tower within the castle still tolls on the full moon. The victorious Crusaders established a permanent garrison in 3828 AR to watch over Gallowspire, and then the alliances dissolved on friendly terms. The Knights of Ozem remained ever vigilant of the Lich's return. They named this new country Lastwall. But in 4719 AR, not even 1,000 years after the formation of Lastwall, Tar-Baphon escaped. He destroyed Lastwall and began a new reign of terror. The Knights of Ozem renamed themselves as the Knights of Lastwall and dedicated themselves to the destruction of the Lich King and reclaiming their nation. In many ways, it seems that a new Shining Crusade is just underway, one whose first major battles have yet to be fought. In this war against the undead, what role will you play?